of Alderman for Tuesday, October the 18th. I've got a few changes to our agenda. I'm going to ask you to remove item B7 to request permission to hire an employee in the Oxford Police Department. If you'll remove that from the consent agenda. I'm going to ask you to add to the consent request permission to declare equipment surplus in the Oxford Police Department Metro Narcotics Division and authorize its disposal. And I'll also ask you to add request permission to hire an employee in the Financial Administration City Clerk's Department. Those are the only changes I have. Braxton, Ashley, did I get them all?
Yes, ma'am. I didn't have anything else.
All right. Did you have anything else, Braxton?
Did you get those?
I did not, but I wrote it down and then didn't read it. Sorry. Request permission to hire Jesse Malone as a part-time docent for historic properties. Had a line through the one above it and didn't read that one. There we go. Thank you very much.
Are you talking?
Huh?
That's it.
Oh, I thought you were asking a question. Okay, those are the only additions or changes that I have with no other. Could I have a motion to adopt the agenda?
I so move.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? At this time is when I usually would give a mayor's report. I would say that in light of the tragedy that happened right behind this building, our hearts are just broken for Walker Fielder's family and any of you that are his friends and classmates. So at this time, instead of a mayor's report, I'm just going to ask you to take a brief moment of silence. All right, thank you. All right, I would ask you to authorize the approval of the minutes of the regular meeting on October the 4th, 2022, and the recess meeting on October the 12th.
Move we approve.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Ask you to authorize the approval of accounts for all city departments.
So moved. Second.
All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Ask you to consider the consent agenda with a few additions and one deletion.
Make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Update on balconies around the square that have not completed necessary repairs. Let Mr. Mizell and Mr. Green come up. And for the students in the room, Jonathan Mizell is our building official and Hollis Green is our department head over developmental services, which oversees building and planning and engineering. So y'all know what we're talking about.
Thank you, Mayor.
Yes.
The first meeting of October last year, the board decided to give each commercial balcony owner that has balconies on the city right-of-way 1 year to bring them in compliance with the 2018 IBC code. At this point, we've had all but 4 be able to do that. We've got 2 that have got contractors lined up or are currently working on that, so we feel pretty good about those 2.
Absolutely.
And we have the 2 that we need to talk about tonight are the Duval's building and David Flauch here for any questions you might have for him, and the Thompson building of the Tollison Webb Law Firm. So since David's here, I'll talk about the Thompson building first. We had multiple.
You're talking about the Duval's building first.
No,
No, you're going to do Thompson House.
We'll do Thompson.
Tollison first.
And then,
okay.
and then we'll come back to David. I talked to Taylor Webb of Tollison Webb, and frankly, they are taking a wait-and-see attitude, or position, not attitude. They're wanting to see what the desire of the board is. They're not in compliance. Well, that's...
They are not, and I want to make sure that I'm stating this correctly, they are not in compliance and have no intention of becoming in compliance? Is that my understanding?
I don't want to put words in his mouth. His words to me were, we'll wait and see what the board's decision is at this meeting.
Okay, and do you believe that he's aware that the board's position a year ago, October, was, yeah, it was last October, right? So a year ago, I think we made it clear that our position was that you had a year to come up with a plan.
Correct.
Right? Okay. I'm just making sure that.
So, and I'll give you a little background information. A year ago, he has an engineer's report that specifically related to the wraparound balconies. The other two are in they comply, but the wraparound balconies do not, the ones on the front. Okay. They are at 75, I don't want to get too technical here, we'll get in the weeds, but they're at 75 pounds per square foot. They need to come up to code, they need to be at 100. So it would require repairs to be able to do that.
Correct.
And the engineer's report said that he was comfortable recommending a maximum load of 50 people at 75 pounds per square foot. At the last year's board meeting, y'all cut that all recommendations in half, so he could have 25 people this past year on his balcony.
Okay, so they are not here this evening. I know Mr. Webb is sick and couldn't be here. What is, I think we made it clear that there was a year to develop a plan, and I know we still have a few that haven't been fixed, but have plans for doing so. Pope, do you have anything to add?
Only this, that you may also remember that after the Thompson House, they disagreed with the building inspector's report and its unsafety, and they disagreed with the grounds for that report. And we looked at our ordinance to see if there was a way we could change it so that if they had a disagreement with the builder's conclusions or specific reading of the ordinance, they could go to a committee or commission and find out whether or not our builder got it right. And it would be made up of people with some knowledge of that particular specialty and one or two folks from our planning commission. We have made that available to them and said, if you disagree with it, let that committee know the reason for your agreement, and we'll form up one of those meetings that we only have on an ad hoc basis and rule on it. They have so far declined to take advantage of that, which we formed really in cooperation and discussion with them in the first few months after this. If the board wants to take a more specific action and refer this somewhere else, then probably that discussion should go to executive session because it involves potential litigation.
Okay, so to make any decision based on that balcony, you believe it needs to be an executive session?
At least it needs to begin there because there'll be some discussion of the potential for litigation. I mean,
Okay.
there's already been some.
All right.
So, yes.
Okay, then we will take that back up in our last item on our agenda, which is executive session. All right, we'll move to the Duval's building.
David, if you want to speak, you can. I'll quickly tell you that he got an engineer's report that recommended that balcony come down.
Okay?
Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Absolutely, welcome.
We have met with the structural engineer, we have met with an architect, we've gotten quote from a contractor, and the bid that we got to take the balcony down, to put up a new balcony, to bring it on out to the edge of the sidewalk like everybody else is with structural support, went from the cost of the contractor was 30-something thousand, the first bid we got from them, then it went up to 40-something thousand, and with professional fees and stuff, we're looking at a $50,000 balcony, and we're just not willing to spend that money on it. And so if you want us to take what we've got down, then we'll get a contractor or somebody and take that sucker down.
Would you not be interested in going back with what you have up there now?
You can't. I mean, it won't meet code. What the engineer told me is that cantilevered balcony will not meet code. And it's not a.
What if it's not occupiable? In other words, what if you bricked up or whatever the door? Is that? I asked another alderman about this today. We were discussing it, and I'm just asking you: do they still think it's too dangerous to stay up?
They didn't say it was too dangerous to stay up. It just can't. It's not load bearing. He said there was no risk of it falling.
I thought it did say there was a risk.
That was what Chris Carter wanted
Okay.
to say. But the engineer's report said that there was no risk of it falling. And so it's,
Would you be, I'm just asking this for future, in case we wanted to postpone it, would you be interested in just boarding it up and leaving it there for the look?
well, we'll be glad to do that if the city's fine with that.
Well, I want to know what the engineering report says, because my understanding, it's been a long time since I looked at it, but,
All right, he said, I'm looking at a highlighted portion of the, Mark Watson's report. Mark was the structural engineer. Said the existing conditions contain severe rust and corrosion, which have greatly compromised the balcony structural integrity. The balcony is not structurally safe for use and should not be used for any reason. Recommendations would be to remove and replace the feature. But, he also said, and I don't know if it's in this report, he's issued a supplemental report, that it was not in danger of falling. Let's put it that way, or coming down.
okay. It's been my understanding, so that there was danger. And maybe that was just my perception, but I thought there was something that we've read at some point that indicated.
I don't know if it's the one he sent or I sent, but he issued two different reports.
Yeah, the only one I ever got.
Okay. Because there were questions raised
Right.
a year ago about whether
Right.
it would fall. Mm-hmm. And I think it was recommended by your building inspector at the time that it was gonna fall or that it needed to come down immediately.
Right.
And that wasn't the case.
Well, and, it's one of those things that if it was on a house, on private property, we wouldn't be having this discussion, but if it fell or if somebody's owning
We don't
something
want it-
happens,
we
of
don't want
course,
it
it's
to
on
fall
city
either.
property. Oh, I know. So, I believe, and Hollis, correct me here if I'm wrong, so the board's action would be to revoke the license for the balcony, is that?
Correct, well, that would be your option.
And in revoking the license for the balcony, that would require it to be removed.
Correct.
Of course, I don't think there's anybody that wants the look of that building to change or what have you, but I mean, we also, public safety issues have to trump that. So, what are y'all's
I'd like to
thoughts?
see this tabled until we get if there is another engineer's report, tabled to our next meeting.
Let me compare what I've got in my files. I can send you emails from Mr. Watson that he sent to me, and I think there was a supplemental report that my recollection was that he did a supplemental report on that. Let's be sure on that. But, in my conversations with Mr. Watson, he did not believe that it was any danger to fall. But it just doesn't need to be used, and
Right.
it hasn't been used.
Right.
We've had conversations with David Swider at End of All Music, and he's been great about, not using it and keeping people off of it. So,
Right. And we appreciate that. So, what are your thoughts?
I'll make a motion to table this until our next meeting so we can see this other
I
report.
got one question though. I mean, if we table it and we kick the can down the road and we say we're gonna give you a year,
I'm not
2
giving you.
years, I understand that, but at some point, this has got to be.
Yeah, something's got to be done. I'm not telling y'all what to do or what not to do.
Sure.
And I'll be glad to get the report to you between now and next month's meeting. But I'm just, with,
I hate to take
we're spending money on other things right now, and the balcony is not first on the list.
Absolutely.
Well, I mean, if he says it's safe, it's just, nobody can go up there, I'm fine with it staying, but if he doesn't say that,
But that
it
won't
needs
be.
to come down.
But if there is rust and there is deterioration of whatever, then it's not gonna be safe just like that for long. I mean, so even if that's a temporary, okay, he says that we're not in any danger of it falling right now, it's a really short term.
We'll just need to
I'm not,
see,
yeah, I mean,
we'll
I
have to
just,
see what
we
the
need to,
engineer says,
yeah.
but yeah.
I don't mind, several years ago, I had contacted another steel builder about replacing the decking on it. And he gave me a bid on that, but, this, of course, probably 10 years later since we had that conversation. I don't mind going back to that builder and seeing, if that's feasible, and if so, what pros and cons effects that it might have, on any extended life.
Yeah.
About,
Mayor, I think what we know is, given, you can somebody else standing on it again, so we know that. What we have to decide is, it'll be 5 more years from now before, by our rule, before we ask for another
Assessment,
examination.
yeah.
So, can Mark Watson tell us, can he give us an email or report, something that says, you're good for the next 5 years? And then y'all have the information to know.
That's
what we
the
gotta hear.
important question.
Yeah, that's the
I mean,
question.
that's the question, David, you know, we're not trying to be jerks, we just, it's gotta be safe, and it's over a city sidewalk, and if there's any risk at all of someone being harmed and we're aware of it, we gotta address it, and
I'll
so.
ask him that, and I'll ask him if there's anything that can be done to extend it for another 5 years even.
And, yeah, and just say that, you know, if no
Without
one
load
goes out on it, but how can it be secured to not
5
be in a
years without load
danger?
bearing.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Find that out.
do you think we can have that in the next 2 weeks?
I hope to have it back to you by the November meeting, okay?
Yes,
I
it's November
second the
1st,
motion.
so that's what, I mean, it's just 2 weeks away.
We're 2 weeks.
2 weeks
Try.
away,
I'll do
so,
my best.
if you'll nudge him,
Okay,
that'd be great.
absolutely.
All right,
Thank you.
all right, thank you, sir. So I guess that we probably need a motion to, I think, did you make a motion?
Made a
Okay, so we
motion.
have a motion to table it to the next meeting. Do I have a second?
Second.
We're just, what, is that table the whole thing or the?
No, to table Duval's balcony until the next meeting, and we are going to discuss the Thompson House balcony in executive session of this meeting. Okay, so a motion is second.
I mean, Pope knows Roberts better than I, but I think that if I think any alderman can table it without even a motion, but I'm not sure. In other words, I don't think we have to vote on a tabling. I think everybody's for it, so I'm fine with it. I second. the
All in
motion.
favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Great. Discuss Oxford University transit vehicles and authorize the mayor to sign a letter of support for MDOT for the purchase of out-of-state vehicles. Donna?
So, a few years ago, we had put 8 buses on order, and then Corona hit and the prices skyrocketed, and so the state contract was, prices were not any good anymore, so they canceled those. Currently, we have a lot of very old buses in our fleet. 3 are 22 years old, I got a few that are 20 years old, several that are between 12 and 17 years old. The place we're in right now, our number one parts are very hard to find, just for regular vehicles. The buses that are over 15 years, where parts are obsolete at this point. MDOT did find 3 vans that we were able to purchase, no cost to the city, because our multimodal grant picked up the 20%. And those will be coming to us hopefully by the end of December, and they went out of state on Oklahoma state contract to procure those. I have asked, could we also go on other state FTA contracts to purchase other vehicles as well. They have given us permission to do so as long as they get a letter from the city stating they're giving me permission to move forward with
Well,
that.
we certainly want to give you permission to move forward there. Do I have a motion for me to be authorized to sign that letter?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? Any opposed? Request permission for 4 employees to attend the MDOT 46th Annual Conference, Training, and Professional Development Meeting on November 14th through the 17th in Biloxi at an estimated cost of $3,448, and a portion of this cost will be covered by scholarships from MDOT.
Motion made.
Second.
All in favor? Any opposed? Thank you, Donna. Request permission to accept reverse auction bids for equipment in the Environmental Services Department. Amberlyn?
Yes, ma'am. Permission to purchase a recycling truck from Tri-State Truck Center, $425,000.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? Any opposed? And students that are here, the reason it's so easy to vote on that is because we've already budgeted for it. So it's kind of a no-brainer, but she still has to have the permission to order it. And just don't want y'all to think that we're just spending $425,000 like it's just Permission to buy a $425,000 truck, done. No, we've budgeted for that, so just so you know. Request permission to reject reversed auction bids for equipment for the Environmental Services Department.
This was a comparison to the request we made previously, and we would like to ask to reject these bids, please.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? Any opposed? Thank you. Second reading and public hearing for proposed ordinance amending Articles 7 and 10 of the Land Development Code. Ben Raquette?
How are you?
Great, how are you?
Good. Yes, the second reading of proposed modifications to the Land Development Code, primarily for rope lighting, sign materials, and so that's both permanent signs on a building and then also the design standards for monument signs. We did receive one comment from Mr. Ed Movitz, who also suggested a tweak to the rope lighting definition to also include strip LED lighting, which is I think some recent advancements in technology, and it's waterproofed or has a coating over the top of it.
Strip lights or tape light?
Tape light, strip lighting, yes. So as you can see, we've incorporated that into the definition. So those are the only modifications at this point, and that's the only comment that I've received to date.
All right, so this is a second reading and public hearing. Is there anyone here in the audience that would like to make any public comment about this ordinance change? All right, with no comments and the only one that we've gotten being reported, does the board have any questions or comments? All right, then at our next board meeting, we will have a third reading and vote on that change.
With the safety issue with this, can we go ahead and vote on this tonight?
Yeah, certainly, if you'd like to. If you'd like to make that motion.
Motion made.
All right. Was there a second?
Yes.
Okay, motion and second. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Great, so that ordinance will go into effect in 30 days.
Great.
Right, request approval of a modification to the Oxford Commons Planned Unit Development is provided in section 2.6.16.9 for case 2896, David Blackburn for property located in the Oxford Commons PUD being further identified as, why is this thing not working?
Just keep reading.
The screen's not working. Help me out, Temple. I'm not gonna read all
There's
these
148
PPINs. I'm gonna let him post those. All right, so I should say that the next three items on our agenda, 13, 14, and 15, are related, and that those three items will kind of be discussed all together, although all three will have a separate motion or lack of to move forward. So I'm going to turn it over to Ben, but just know that the discussion between numbers 13, 14, and 15 are kind of intertwined. So Ben, I'll let you get us started.
Thank you, and I've put out an awful lot of information for these three reports. I'll just surmise the three cases here, and then if you have any questions of me, that's fine. I did see the applicant and Paul Koshnina are in the room as well, as are other people that may wish to speak as well. So tonight before us are three items related to Oxford Commons, case 2896, which is a PUD modification that was recommended by the Planning Commission, a denial recommendation by the Planning Commission. Case 2897, which is a preliminary and final plat for the Preserve Phase 5. There was no recommendation by the Planning Commission. And then an appeal of case 2895, which was a special exception for a gated entry, and that was denied by the Planning Commission. Mr. Blackburn is seeking the ability to install a gate at his property, but gates are prohibited across a public road according to state and local laws. Therefore, Mr. Blackburn is making these requests to make a gated entry a possibility. In order to do so, Mr. Blackburn needs to propose a modification to the Oxford Commons PUD, and he has done that, and it changes three items. It changes the vehicular circulation design for Lakewood Hill Drive from a public road to a private road. The drive proposes to allow emergency access through a portion of Track G with gates at both the east and the west end. An easement will be granted to the city of Oxford for the water line that's there, but then also for emergency access. And a pedestrian easement is granted to the Oxford Homeowners Association for the use of the sidewalks along this private portion of Lakewood Hill Drive. The second change would be a reduction in the density. In Track G, it's reduced from a total of 67 proposed units to 44 units. And then there are a few minor revisions and technical clarifications to the clarification and summary condition list. Vision 2037 reaffirmed the guiding principles, and they are expressions of the community's visions and values with 6 fundamental design and planning principles to guide our growth. Principle 1 recognizes Oxford's historic ways of town planning. It encourages these traditions for future growth patterns. Gated entries for single-family development have never been part of that development pattern and are contrary to the principle. Principle 4 seeks to create a densely connected network of streets and roads and sidewalks that serve all users of the transportation network. Gates disrupt this connectivity, and especially so in the Oxford Commons PUD, which has always considered this connectivity. This item was part of that PUD modification that was denied with a 6-0 vote. The subdivision now proposes a total of 3 lots. It's a reduction of 8 total from what was previously considered by the Planning Commission and the Mayor and Board. That final plat came before the Planning Commission in July of this year, but then it never made it forward to the Mayor and Board of Aldermen. The plat proposes that Lakewood Hill Drive will be privately owned, maintained, and in addition to that, the sidewalks, the sewer, and the lift station will also be privately owned and maintained. There was some concern at the Planning Commission about the water line, and it's about 2,200 feet, and whether or not there is city interest in maintaining that 2,200 feet of pipe. Mr. Blackburn is proposing gates at the west and the east portions of Lot 3. Emergency access will be provided through this gate, and the Oxford Homeowners Association will have an easement for the use of the sidewalks. Concerns by staff and the Planning Commission that this, at some point, there are concerns about the ability to maintain all this infrastructure, the high hazard dam, the road, et cetera, and the concern is that at some point in the future that this will be turned over to the city. There was also concerns about the high hazard dam and the maintenance obligations of that dam. And then also traffic impacts for new development, especially over at the Oaks, and their only ability to connect to the core of the Oxford Commons commercial development being through Sisk Avenue. The Planning Commission did not make a recommendation on this item, but y'all are ultimately the deciders on whether or not to approve a subdivision plat. And then lastly, case 2895, which this is being heard as an appeal, which is the request by special exception for a gated entry, which was heard by the Planning Commission last Monday, and that item was denied. The gate will meet all of the technical requirements as laid out in the Land Development Code, but staff is not supportive of this request due to its limiting connectivity through the Oxford Commons development. Provided you with all the commentary from the Planning Commission on these items, also a link to the video. We did receive correspondence from Mr. Dick Dickerson that is, I believe, provided within the board pack for you tonight. He is in the room, and with that, I'm happy to entertain any questions that you might have.
So should we address this in the order that it's presented, Ben?
I think we can.
As far as I'm realizing now that my printed agenda and our agenda online are not the exact same, so I hope I hadn't missed something. But on the agenda online, this is item number 11, 12, and 13, and on my printed, it's 13, 14, and 15. So
That's what we've got in our board pack.
it's what, 13,
13,
14, and 15?
Yep.
Okay. I don't know what's going on there. Okay, I was just making sure I wasn't confusing the public about what. You've got 11? Okay, I don't know. Anyway, I just was trying not to, I had said that we were deciding 13, 14, and 15, so I just didn't want to confuse anybody. Yeah, okay, so.
Mayor,
Yes.
Ben was asking me the same question. I think in order to amend the plat, And in order to do the gates, if you're going to ask for them, you have to first amend the PUD. So you do have to take them in the order. The first question
Okay.
is, can the PUD be amended to close a road, to change what the PUD shows? And then, can the subdivision plat be amended as proposed? And then you get to the third question. But you have to do those first two things
Okay.
first.
All right, so the first question here in item number 13 is modification of the PUD. So Ben has spoken, and I'm gonna let Mr. Blackburn come up if he would like to say anything that you'd like to say.
Thank you, Mayor. First of all, I apologize for all the confusion with this. It kind of got a little bit with everything. There's 3 cases, but really all I'm asking for is a private gate on a private drive. It's an existing private drive. We're not trying to change anything at all other than just putting a gate on a private drive. Our plans are for that drive, no matter what, to stay private. So it's that's all we're asking for.
Okay,
Thank you.
yep, thank you. All right, so, I mean, that takes us to item 15, which is the special exception rather than the modification of the PUD. That's where I'm confused on which
Well,
order to,
Yeah, that's his request, and I understand that's his request.
Yeah.
But the PUD shows it as a public road. Maybe I've misunderstood that, but if the PUD shows it as a public road, there does have to be a change to the PUD to then allow a plat to be entered to show it as a private road. It's got public utilities on it, and
The PUD shows it as a planned public road,
correct.
because it's not now.
Accepted.
Correct. I guess what y'all could do is not, he could, maybe he's saying he's withdrawing any subdivision plat at all, but I hadn't understood that. But if he is, if the subdivision plat now shows it as a plat, as a private road, y'all have to get through that issue. Are you going to allow it to be a private road when the PUD shows it as a public one? The PUD controls out there, and the plats need to be generally consistent with the PUD. The PUD was the zoning, and in Mississippi, it is the zoning.
So I got a question to that.
Yeah.
If it is shown as a public road and I buy out there, do I have to sign off on changing of the PUD?
He's not to a subdivision amendment. If he were, if it had already been platted, then if you were interested or affected by this change, then yes, you would have to sign on it if you could show your interest and effect. As I understand it, there's not a subdivision plat. That's question number 2.
that's number 14 on your agenda.
Correct, yeah, it's the second
to
question. Right now, he's asking that the PUD that indicates that this is a public road, part of the interconnectivity of the PUD, as shown, again, people did move out there after this city passed the PUD plan, and that's why he does and did the first time a week ago ask to amend the PUD so it no longer shows it as a public road when people look at the PUD that's on record. It's no longer.
Because everything in the PUD is a public road. This is a private road because it hasn't been turned over to the city. There are other private roads in Oxford Commons that are part of the PUD.
That are
Not shown on the PUD as such. This was
not shown
shown
PUD,
as
I'm
one of the
sorry.
connecting roads.
They're not shown at all. They're just not a part of the PUD.
So
That's
when the
my
PUD was
understanding.
This
adopted,
road-
those
this-
roads were just not on
But they're
there.
like alleyways and things like that. to get in.
Others, this one is.
Right, this is
Correct.
shown on the PUD as a planned.
Correct.
It's shown on the PUD, even though at this time it's on private. The PUD shows it to be a planned public road.
Correct.
How many
But it hadn't been
changes have we
accepted
done to
yet.
this PUD?
You what?
How many changes have we done to this PUD since it started, David?
At least
before my time.
4 or 5. But they do, a change to a PUD in Mississippi is a zoning change. That's the first thing. Plus, we do have the guiding principles if you want to make a change to a PUD. And the reason is we don't require them to individually zone every parcel. You come to the city once or twice or once every 4 or 5 years and say, this is the general principle, and this is how roads are laid out, this is how infrastructure is laid, this is the orientation of buildings. Now, don't make me bother with individual zoning of individual lots. But the public moving there, just like zoning, gets to rely upon that orientation, or at least that's what Mississippi says. There are some states where they say PUD's like a subdivision plat, and you can amend it with subdivision changes, whatever those may be. Mississippi says it's zoning. So that's the first question. And then, does he have to plat those other things? Well, maybe not. In fact, I think Ben said you don't have to plat all this just yet if you don't want to. But it does also show right now that area with certain private facilities and public facilities, the lake maintenance, is that now going to be inside of a private road? And if so, is that a change to other subdivisions? I don't think it is. I don't know that he has to have a subdivision plat in order to ask for a gate, but that's what was asked last week. Maybe that's a change.
David?
You better just back up every time instead of going.
Yeah, that's a good idea. I understand why he's saying it's a public road. There's nothing on the PUD. The PUD was very specific on 2 roads that had to be built as part of the PUD. And there were certain restrictions with those roads. There were no restrictions on any of these others, and it didn't say whether these were public or private. I mean, they're making the assumption that they're all public, but that's not, that was never
So
spoken.
every road that's in a PUD doesn't have to be public?
No. Every
one that we're voting on and approving?
No. And there are private roads in the PUD. There's nothing there's not like a specific thing. So it's a depiction. This same thing also depicts a picture of the square. It depicts a lot, it's just a depiction that's just showing in general what the PUD is, but there's a written rules that have to be followed in the PUD. And there are certain roads that had to be built as requirements of the PUD. This is not anything like that. Number 2 is, this is a private road. There's nothing that's going to require me to make it public. I have no plans to make it public. So no matter what, I think there's a confusion of, well, if we deny this, then we're going to get connected. No matter, it's going to stay private. It's going to stay as a cul-de-sac. That's not going to change. If you vote it down, there's going to be a sign that says private drive, no trespassing. I mean, that's what it'll do. And I would like to put a gate up. Every homeowner in the community, except for Mr. Dickerson, that I've spoken with, is in favor of it. They don't want the through traffic through there. It's not even set up for through traffic on this road. I mean, it's a 2-lane road and it's got several blind spots. It's not made to be a cut-through road. And with our plans to now connect to Highway 30, it's just not set up for it. So the neighbors don't want this road. Now, I say that I shouldn't say that because Mr. Dickerson does. But I've spoken to everybody on that street. I've not spoken to every homeowner because we have 200, but the vast majority don't want the road through. Again, it's a private drive. All I'm asking for, and we have 50 acres. My house is very isolated back there, and it's a safety issue for my family. And so, like any of you would do, if you had a safety issue and you'd had some safety things come up, you'd want to do the same thing I'm doing.
So turn it over to the board for the discussion. I guess the first thing that we are determining is modification of the PUD. Do you have anything to add, Ben?
I just want to make one
Mr. Dickerson
clarification.
or anybody else that's here to speak?
I just want to make a clarification to what David said. And, you know, he says that the PUD plan doesn't really call out a public road or a private road, and he's right. But what the PUD shows is a vehicular circulation plan. And so by him changing this private, to a private section, that changes the vehicular circulation plan, which I think I can tell you from myself, is my understanding that this would be a public road, and all of these roads that are inside here would be public, which is why you have the vehicular circulation.
But we also thought there were going to be 39 homes, 42 homes, or whatever else down there, and it's now 1. I mean, it's 50 acres owned by a single individual.
And Rick, what that gets to, if someone makes the motion to approve, then you need to say, we think there's been substantial change and there's a public need for it. I mean, you're making a zoning change, and if that's the decision you think that based on things you know, and David sort of made this argument to the Planning Commission. He said, well, things are different than what we knew originally, so.
So when you say the vehicular plan, does that also, I'm sure, includes the other road that is supposed to be in the plan that comes off of the frontage road? Isn't there another entrance that's coming off the frontage road?
Correct.
So there is another entrance coming in. I mean, planned, just like supposedly this one was.
Right.
Okay.
And to your point, he does still have density remaining. He does have the ability to build more homes. So even though there's one there, he does still have the ability to build, I think a total of 44 is what the reduction is. So there's some residual of homes left.
Most of those are taken up with what's already platted.
Okay.
They're already there.
Okay.
This road was a contact, though, in the vehicular traffic. It was going to connect to the Oaks, the other, right across from the right-of-way or the easement from the utilities, right?
It would connect over to Buddy East Parkway, and then it connects. In fact, I think there have been 2 preliminary plats that have been approved, maybe even 4 that have been approved for the Oaks that were all based off of this road, that as a result will have to be modified. And utilities will have to be figured out how they'll be run. I believe that they'll come up with an extension of Buddy East Parkway, or that will continue up, and utilities might run there. I think it was planned initially, which came before the Planning Commission and this board, for continuation of the utilities through Lakewood Hill Drive over to those phases of the Oaks.
But before he can get to the Oaks, I mean, if he's got some changes he has to make, then he'll have to come back before us.
Right. Bottom line, what we're trying to do is come up with a win-win. The homeowners, vast majority, don't want it to be a through road. I'm on 50 acres that's isolated. I need some, from a safety point of view, wanted a gate. And the city wanted to have some ways to provide connectivity. So with the 2 gates, we're going to give connectivity in case of emergency. So you have that in case of emergency. You have connectivity. You prevent, for all the homeowners out there that don't want all that through traffic, on a normal day-to-day, you don't have the through traffic. And for me personally, I'm able to get the security I need being isolated on 50 acres. So it's the end of the day, if we were just trying to, if I was just trying to, I would just be doing a gate, not having the connectivity at all. I'm trying to create a win-win for the city.
So you're saying that you want to go ahead and do the connectivity, but have a gate on both sides, but you want to own all of the property?
It's all owned by me, right? We're not, where the confusion came about, and I apologize to the plaintiff, because everybody was thinking it was a public road, and I'm asking to make it private. It is a private road. No matter what is decided here, it's going to stay a private.
I mean, there's somebody in my neighborhood that has a gate on both their driveways, one coming off Eagle Springs, one coming off Cullen. I know this is a different story, it's a PUD, but it's still their private, okay, I'm
In
following.
my mind,
I
the
didn't
whole thing
realize.
changed. And
I was thinking we were just talking about one gate, but.
All right. Well, I mean, in my mind, the whole thing kind of changed when we went from owning an acre with your house to now that somebody owns 50 acres. I mean, we've got smaller farms in this county than 50 acres. I look at it as a change that went from however many houses down to 1. And in my mind, it is a change for the whole area.
So, Rihanna, any concern on your part with public infrastructure?
With infrastructure regarding the water, the roads?
Both.
The issue of the water came up at the Planning Commission, and I spoke then that there are 2 ways to look at it. One is that we are going to maintain, now if this is approved, an 8-inch water main through a private driveway, which if this had been presented to us as a private property, we would not have. We would have placed a meter at the end of the driveway, and there would have been one private service line. The other side of that is that again, the connectivity, this was presented with the Oaks, and so we were looking at looping our water lines and having additional connections for our water lines, and this was actually how the Oaks are going to be fed water. So I see it both ways. I see the benefit of having the loop in there. And regarding the streets, I've noted in my report, and I've told David this, I do think ultimately at some point this infrastructure will come back to the city. I don't believe that long-term, and I think the board, I think probably each of you have been contacted at some point by a subdivision or a HOA that wants private infrastructure to be taken back over by the city because it's the expense associated with it. If it's not, then, and David said that he's not, and that's, each case is different. The one thing that is a little different from previous conversations is about the connectivity, and David mentioned that if the gates are not allowed, then he would put just a no trespassing sign and that it's his driveway, and that's the first I've heard of that. In the conversations regarding the gate that we had, it was discussed that if the board allowed this, that there would still be there would be access allowed for emergencies, and my concern would just be the Oaks moving forward because they will only have one point of access, and that would be off of Buddy East. So that's a new piece, and I haven't had a chance to talk to David because I just heard it. So I'm a little bit unsure about that. That's not what I had understood. So I'm not.
That was the case I didn't have to be able to stop people, to make them understand to not come over the property.
And that's the part that, anyway, I don't know that.
Okay, so
that's,
my question is, let's say 15 years from now, it comes back and says, all right, we want you to take over the infrastructure. Would whoever it is, have to come up to the standards of the city at that point?
I think what we would look at, and what we had stated is we would do a final inspection because we were trying to get a final inspection scheduled back in July for this road. It was going to be public back then. We were looking to get the final inspection. So I have stated that I would like to go ahead and get that final inspection and have it on record that it meets the standards so that in 15 years, we would look at, it was built to the standards of the city at that time, and then we would look at the maintenance, if there was any maintenance needs. And you're familiar that usually it's when an overlay is needed or there's been a lack of maintenance and there's a massive problem that we're contacted to come in and that people ask us to take over a private drive. So, and at that point, I think any recommendation to the board would be that maintenance would still need to be performed. It would need to be back to a point that the citizens would not have to take over, provide an additional expense. So.
What about the dam?
So that is a unique situation as well because it is a high hazard dam, and the dam existed out there in a different capacity prior to this project. And this, when they came through with this phase, they did projects to improve it, but also to enlarge it greatly. And so we've had a lot of conversations about that, and in our conversations, we've spoken with Paul Costanina, who's the engineer of record, and then I've also had a lot of conversation with John Crawley in our office, who does a lot of design work for dams, and Paul and John have both stated that due to the type of dam and the way that it's designed, it will be low cost to maintain on an annual basis, and so you're probably looking at $10,000 to $20,000, at most a year to maintain. I say low cost, compared to other infrastructure and what I was concerned. So, and then there'll be annual inspections. They'll report to Shane and emergency management. So those parts are there. Worst case, which I always tend to look at, is the liability if something happens, because if there was a failure, of course, everybody downstream would be impacted, and that would be within the Oaks development. So it's also a tremendous amount of liability that is taken on by a small group, but that's a liability issue and not.
But Rihanna,
it goes to somebody. The liability is going to go to the HOA or it's going to go to the private landowner. It's going somewhere.
Yes.
And I guess there's a question, and I just don't know the answer to it. Right now, last week there was a proposal that the subdivision plat be approved, which was denied. But as part of that subdivision plat drawn up, at last week's meeting, the request was that just this 50-acre landowner be charged with liability for ultimate upkeep maintenance of that dam if it were to fail, liability. Where does it stand now? Right now, does that mean that it's just the HOA and whatever other plats already surround it?
So I think it's still
So if there's no subdivision plat amendment or request today?
If this isn't approved, then it's up to all of the Oxford Commons Homeowners Association.
Right, I can't tell whether we're withdrawing the subdivision plat approval, but that's another link to this. If you are, recognize that you may be dropping down, and David offered this up as a nice thing for his neighbors, is I'm taking on this responsibility and liability last week's meeting. Today, I think I've heard that I don't need the subdivision plat, I just need a closed road, amend the PUD to allow that, and then move straight to the gate issue or not, whatever. I think that's what I'm hearing him say.
The change that I see is it's gone from, like I said earlier, 44 or whatever we're at, down to 1. And that one person says, everything out there I paid for beforehand, and I'm gonna continue to pay for. I mean, he's the one that built all the roads, he built all the infrastructure, he's built the lake. The lake was already there, but he's upgraded it. I mean, if he's done that and he's done all of the work to get there, that's the change that I see, that he now, I'm gonna own it. So, I mean, I'd make that motion to change the PUD because of the change that I've seen going from 44 or whatever it was, just to one person.
For that whole track, it was 67.
Okay.
Before we go further with a second, we've not given the public the opportunity to speak yet, and so I want to do that before we move further. Is there anyone who is in the audience? Mr. Dickerson?
My name's Dick Dickerson, and I live on Lakewood Hill Drive. I would like to clarify one point. My wife and I are not the only ones that are against closing this road. I know one of my neighbors is here who would be for closing the road. His next door neighbor, the Carnathans, are against it. And 3 houses down from me, Don Felt and his wife, are against closing the road. So it's not just me. When we built our house 5 years ago, we bought based on a master plan. And at the Planning Commission, I showed copies of the master plan, which shows, this is the street we're talking about, making it a private drive now, but it's circulated all the way around. This was when we did it. When the PUD originally formed in 2004, it showed the same circulation. In 2015, still the same circulation. This is the Oaks area. This is Lakewood Hill, and it's all circulating. Even as late as April of 2019, still the same. Don't forget that when this section of road was built, it was built under a preliminary plat approved by the Planning Commission. So everything's built under the thought that this would be a public road and it would be added to and connect to the Oaks. And as late as February of this year, when you did approve the Oaks, when Planning Commission did, it still showed this is Lakewood Hill that would continue on. This is the dam, but the Oaks use that as the main thoroughfare. That's the reason we bought our house. That's the reason that the way it was marketed to us, and that's the way I think it should stay. As far as I don't want to make be insensitive to David's concerns about security, but he's gated his house all the way around, and from the street you can see at least 10 surveillance cameras. So, but still, it may be a concern, but that's where he built his house. And it's gotten to the point now, it seems like, even though the Planning Commission denied the gates, denied modification to the PUD, it's gotten to where it's like, well, if I don't get my way, I'm gonna take my marbles and go home. And that's just not right. And I can't see any way that you could, any reason, shape, or form that you would overrule the Planning Commission, who made very wise decisions and took this under advisement. Those are mine. And I'd ask that the Board of Aldermen also uphold those denials. Thank you.
Thank you,
Quick
Mr.
thing before you
Dickerson.
go, Dick. I just wanted to go through a couple of things with you. So, when the Planning Commission was looking at everything, and I was here with y'all, everything was circulating around that this is a public road, this is a public road. And what it's not is it's not a public road. It was a thought when they designed the PUD, but it was built as a private road. And that's where I think everything got confused in the Planning Commission.
With all due respect, Mr. Addy.
I'm not through yet. Give me a
Okay.
second. So, in my mind, that's where the whole thing has changed, and that's why it's changed so dramatically, is you have now got a single person that owns 50 acres of land. And if they own 50 acres or they own 10, in the state of Mississippi, there are certain things that you can do with that amount of property. And in my mind, it's changing the whole nature of that area. So, in my mind, there is a major change.
Are we sure that it's allowable to put in a private road in a PUD? Is it part of the zoning? But the road was built as a public road to be a public road under public road specifications. They were getting ready to approve or get the final approval on the road. But now it's changed because David wants to make it a private road. He wants, and I just think it's his prerogative, but let him do that against the will of the Planning Commission and against the will of the Board of Aldermen.
But you don't see a major change in it going from, what'd you say, 67, whatever it was planned to be, and now there's a single person that is in the middle of this whole development that owns 50 acres. You don't see that as a major change?
It is a major change, but it shouldn't be allowed.
So you're saying he can't buy the properties?
He needs to modify the PUD to be able to do that. It's the way I see it.
I thought that's what we're talking about.
I think that's what we're doing.
That is what you're talking about. So he's asking to modify the PUD when, in my opinion, the PUD should not be modified, and in the opinion of the Planning Commission, who saw it under more technical issues, the reason not to approve the modification, particularly the water system, the sewer system, the connectivity to the Oaks. So they saw that it was not a viable thing to do. But now it's changed in the last week. There was going to be an HOA for that area. That HOA was going to take care of all costs, and now there's not going to be an HOA. It's just going to be my land, and it's a private. So
it's been longer than last week, but anyway.
Well, it was on video, so I mean, but anyway, any other questions?
I don't, no. I just was making some points.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. All right, board.
How many total landowners, property owners are affected by the gate?
Ben, do you know how many people are affected by the gate, if the gate's approved?
How many people are affected, like inside of?
Yeah, who would be inside of
So
the,
inside of the preserve, I believe there's, let's just say 70 or 71 homes.
be affected by the gate? The gate would,
There's only one owner inside
right,
the gate.
one, right? Okay.
Well,
Is there-
inside of the preserve, there's 71 homeowners. That would include Mr. Blackburn, and then I believe 389 homes inside of the
Oaks, which is undeveloped this time.
Correct. I think there's maybe 4 phases under development.
And Oaks is gonna have to come back.
Is there anyone else in the audience that is here to speak? All right, yes, sir. If you'll come to the podium and introduce yourself, please, sir.
Yes, my name is Walker Brown, and I'm a resident now of Lake Hill Drive. I've been a homeowner in Oxford Commons since 2017 as well. And I'm very familiar with situations such as this from where I lived previously before moving to Oxford. And there are really 3 types of traffic that we really are concerned as homeowners. We have intra-subdivision traffic, and that's really not that big of an issue, one way or the other. But the other issues are one of cut-through traffic, and then what I would call undesirable traffic, ones that create security issues. David lives in a very secluded area, and I'm aware of another subdivision in a country club community from where we used to live, and same situation. The HOA was approached to try to gate, not gate the community, but gate some access to eliminate cut-through traffic. And the HOA voted it down for liability reasons. They didn't want the responsibilities of the street. David has already mitigated that issue. But the issue is still that there's a security issue. We've already seen law enforcement officers on the street going down into the secluded area in the last few weeks. So, you know, the circulation traffic that they talk about is relatively minor concern. Go out on Sisk because of the number of homeowners that would really be impacted, I think is relatively minimal. But the cut-through traffic and the potential for cut-through traffic is just going to be huge as more and more development occurs out Route 30. That's going to just open up more cut-through traffic to the commercial areas. And I don't believe that the street was really ever intended to be true circulation because it's just too small. So, you know, once again, this is just my opinion, and I'm not as well planned out with my argument. But, you know, we are definitely not, or I should say, we are definitely in favor of having the street to curtail unwanted traffic. That's my opinion.
Thank you, Mr. Brown.
Thank you.
Does anybody have a question for Mr. Brown? No?
Thank you.
All right, thank you, sir. All right, board.
Mayor, I second Alderman Hagg's motion.
Okay, and Rick, can you repeat your motion, please?
Made a
I'm not,
motion
it's been so long, I'm not sure what it was.
Okay. So my motion was to modify the PUD because it has had such a significant change going from, I don't know how many people, 67. Well, you're going down to 44 unit lots, but you're going down to one person. You've gone from one person in 50 acres instead of 200 people in 50 acres.
It was 8, I think, over there, where David was. I think it was going to be 8 homes.
8 homes in the 50 acres.
I'm sorry, it was 11 reduced to 11 total to 3, so a reduction of 8.
So there were 11 homes in 50 acres. Okay. I thought it was 40 something.
Yeah, the whole tract was 67 and then reduced to 44, but that includes the reduction from 11 homes to 3.
Okay. Still a significant change in my mind, and I still think with it being a private road, not public whatsoever, I still make the motion to modify that PUD because of the change.
All right, and is that a second by John Morgan? All right, any other discussion by the board? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Nay.
All right, so that is a 4-3. You yay? You're nay. So that is 1, 2, 3, 4 nays to 3 yays. All right, the motion does not pass. All right, next is request approval of a preliminary plat for case 2897 for the Preserve Phase 5 at Oxford Commons. For property located at Lakewood Hill Drive. Without a plat amendment, do you, I mean, without?
I thought the request was conditioned on a PUD approval.
That's what I'm just making sure I'm not.
It is.
So the PUD had to be approved for there to be a plat to consider, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
I'm a little confused, why would the plat not be considered?
Ben, can you explain that? Because you'll do it better than I.
Well, one of the contingencies was that the PUD would be approved to change that to be private infrastructure.
It's right now it's private.
Well, the request, all we've got before us is the subdivision plat that was presented to you all that included that condition on it.
Okay, wait, I just want to make sure that we're super clear. So the vote was just denied to approve the modification to the PUD. Okay? So
Yeah.
that's what I'm asking. That's my question. Can you still plat the property without a PUD amendment?
Entertain that, and if they don't want to entertain that one condition of approval.
Right.
That's where I'm confused.
What I'm
I'm sorry.
saying is that the subdivision plat that has been submitted included as part of its request for approval a condition that the PUD would be amended to show it a private road. If you all want to drop the subdivision plat's requirement that the PUD be amended to include a private road and pass the subdivision plat without that condition, I think you probably could. That's what Ben was suggesting. But that's the condition that's included on their requested subdivision plat.
I think that would be a question to David, whether he wants to change it for us to approve it that way.
And a question for you all, that having just denied the subdivision the PUD, whether you want to drop that condition, right? It's your issue too. I mean, that's how it came to you, proposed by him and your staff.
If we drop that condition, that would basically assume that it would end up being a public road, and I don't know if David.
No.
I don't think that's right.
It's ever going to be a public.
Yeah, I don't think that John's comment is correct. Brian, what were you going to say?
The point being to me is it's shown as a private road, but I don't think it's ever, again, I think, David, don't let me put words in your mouth. I think what I heard you say was the Oaks was going to come back and show that not connecting, in other words, it would always remain private.
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay.
Yeah, it's always been.
So what would, make sure I'm saying this right. Right now, we have this request for approval of preliminary and final plat for case 2897 with a list of conditions. Number 5 on that list of conditions is approval is contingent on the approval of case 2896, which was just denied by the mayor and board of aldermen. So the board would need to say if they wanted to consider this plat, the preliminary and final plat, they would need to consider that without condition number 5 as it is listed.
That's correct.
So you need to review these other conditions and make sure that you are comfortable with all those conditions.
Right.
Is that a fair assessment?
That is a fair assessment, but know that the reason number 5 was there is because, I mean, this ought to be on the table, is because you needed to say the PUD no longer shows that as a circulating public road in order for the subdivision plat, which shows it as a private road, to make any sense.
It's effectively modifying the PUD.
It is. I mean, so know that although you voted not to modify the PUD, but I assume because of the street circulation, you'll be doing the same thing through the subdivision plat, because it is a private road subdivision plat. Just know that's what you're approving.
And number 8 with the easements on the lots and drainage areas, I mean, I don't know how to start breaking these apart in privates and publics and
Yeah.
what's what, where, when, and how.
I'm not even sure this needs to be addressed tonight, after that, but I mean, that's up to, I just mean, I don't know if there's more changes that need to be made on this.
Well, we had a similar issue for the planning commission. He asked them to go ahead and vote on that, and so they did, and they voted on number 2, the subdivision plat, and said, well, having said we're not changing the PUD, we vote to deny.
They just didn't make a motion.
They tabled I thought they tabled the gate.
They didn't make a
Oh,
motion.
it died for lack of a motion, but they heard it. They heard the second item. And so he's asking you to hear the second item again tonight. But without having modified the
But what
PUD.
I'm trying to determine is, I'm perfectly willing to hear anything on the agenda. I'm trying to decide what that means, what the proper legal path forward is if you've denied a modification to the PUD. What does then approving a preliminary and final plat that makes the same change that you just denied in the PUD? Am I tracking? I mean,
You're tracking exactly.
okay, I mean, I'm just trying to figure out from a legal standpoint, are you just tying yourself in a pretzel right here with number 2? That's what it feels like. That's my art major terminology for what we're looking at. But, so that's why I'm asking the board and planning director what.
Yeah, I thought, of course, the main reason for platting it is to reduce it from 11 lots to 3. But it also includes other things that were just recently denied. So, I mean, and the plat is what the plat is. The final plat has it shown things that were not approved by this board, so I don't know how to cure that. I mean, I agree, I understand what he wishes to have, reduce it from 11 lots to 3, and I'm fine with that, but the plat as shown is, complicates matters.
That's
My question is, let's just say we wanted to approve what he's asking for here, how can we do it without changing the PUD?
Well, and in fact, the site plan that you're being asked to approve says the same thing. It says you can't approve this unless it's conditioned upon approval of the PUD. I mean, the site plan itself, y'all would have to knock that condition out there, but that site plan was given to you with that condition assumed by both your staff.
That's why they're in this order on the
Correct.
agenda, is because
Correct.
approving 1 led you to number 2, led you to number 3, and so I'm sorry, that's.
I don't think it keeps you under Robert's Rule of Orders of asking for a vote on it, but,
Okay.
you know.
I don't quite understand how you can't plat the property. It's a.
You can, but your plat request assumed a grant of a change in the PUD, and they've not granted that. And so the plat request before them assumes that grant. They don't have a plat request before them that doesn't assume that grant. That's all I'm saying.
And of course, I disagree that there was even a need for a change in the PUD, but neither here nor there. I still think if you look at this, this is a 50-acre piece of property. I'm platting it, I'm meeting all the requirements that the city has. I'm just platting my property. And private roads are allowed. I'm not gay, I mean, I'm just platting my property. It's meeting I don't quite understand how you would deny when you can have private roads inside a PUD. I've got a private road, I've got a 3-lot subdivision, it's 50 acres.
And I'm not arguing any of that with you. I am looking at this as what is before the board and was published in this agenda is request approval of a preliminary and final plat, and it has conditions listed, and one of those conditions cannot be met based on the vote that just happened in the agenda item prior.
And for the record, I was never even wanting the PUD to be amended, I was just wanting the plat in the gate.
I hear you. I'm not arguing what you're saying. I'm arguing more process here than I am
So if you make the motion removing number 5, does that get to where
Because these are just conditions the planning commission put forward, the planning department put forward.
Yeah, where it gets you, Rick, that's the right question. Where it gets you is to the disagreement in this board as to whether the PUD viewed that as a public road, whether the city's prior actions have viewed it as a public road, their placement of utilities, and that's the issue. Some of you believe that no, it can be a private road under what's gone before. Some of you believe no, it was a public road and that requires a PUD change. 4 of you believe one thing, 3 of you believed another. That's really where you get to. And so yes, you could make that condition, and perhaps the other 4 will say, no, we think that you can't grant that private road under that plat. But you could amend it otherwise. Are you saying you're asking to amend it and have it as a public road?
No, I'm asking.
It's gonna be a private road.
Here's the issue with Pope's argument is Pope is saying that I'm asking to make it a private road. It is a private road. The PUD allowed me to build a private road out there from the beginning. The PUD did not hold me back from building a private road. I built a private road. It's a it's a private road. It's going to remain a private road. The only thing the board just voted on was there won't be any connectivity now. There was going to be connectivity with the PUD amendment because it would allow for gates. With that denial, there will be no connectivity, which is fine. That's fine.
Will there be connectivity for emergency access?
No, because you can't have gates.
No emergency access?
No, the only way to have emergency access was to have gates. That was the whole.
Oaks then is in jeopardy now.
Yeah,
The Oaks isn't on the agenda tonight. This is the.
Again, you've got the issue, and I think everybody's agreed that the Oaks was platted with the expectation of a public road. I think you've heard that from your engineer. I think that's what at least 4 members of the board thought, and I thought we've already said, yes, we would have to amend the Oaks.
No, we would. No doubt about it. I've got to come back to the Oaks. I guess what everybody's missing the point is that we're dealing with a safety issue for my family, so I'm going to leave it a private road. I don't know how to describe that to everybody, that it is a private road. It's going to remain a private road. The only thing that we just did was we stopped connectivity, which is fine. That's fine. But there's not going to be connectivity without gates. And from a safety point of view for my family, and I don't know what else to say.
I guess that's the last thing I'll say. The request last week to the Planning Commission, the request today was to make it a private road. That request has changed.
It's not. It was not. The request was not to make it a private road. It is a private road. It was never requested to make it a private road.
The PUD was to be changed to reflect that this is no longer part of the connectivity plan, however you want to say that it no longer is. That was the request for the PUD change. The site plan approves that PUD change was granted. It wasn't. If you all now approve the site plan that shows that it is no longer part of the connectivity plan, I won't say public road or private road. If you approve that, if David's argument, it doesn't matter whether you approve it or not, then why would you approve it? But one of the conditions it asks for is that you approve making this a private road. He's telling you orally he doesn't care about that anymore. But that is one of the conditions that was presented to you all. And you all have identified other issues that are interlinked to this, including the Oaks. I don't know how that's going to be resolved. That's a different issue, but I do think the engineers had understood as part of the Oaks approval, it included access across this road. I have no idea how that will get resolved, but all that can go into your thinking as you entertain the second request for the site plan approval.
I'll make a motion removing number 5.
For the plat.
For the plat.
I second.
All right, any other comments from the board? All right, so we have a motion to approve the preliminary and final plat for case 2897 with the removal of number 5, which reads approval is contingent on the approval of case 2896 by the mayor and board of aldermen. All right, we have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed?
I said aye.
I couldn't hear you. Okay, so that's 4-3 the other way. So that's 4-3 vote in favor of plat approval.
I think that's really screwy.
Yeah, anyway, okay. So now, next on the agenda, consider an appeal of the Planning Commission denial of case 2895, a special exception request by David Blackburn for a gated entry as provided in section 3.11.3 for property located at 327 Lakewood Hill Drive, being further identified as PPI M 4502.
Yeah, so same set of facts. This is a proposal for the gate on the east and the west side for emergency access. Emergency access would be allowed. The pedestrian easements would still be in place for the sidewalks. Again, the gate does meet the technical requirements for a gated entry. The Planning Commission denied this unanimously, and so again, you're hearing this on an appeal.
All right.
And again,
David?
I've got 50 acres. Y'all have approved gates with a lot smaller acres than this that are not as isolated. I would think this would be very much approvable based on past moves by the Board of Alderman, consider this a private drive.
All right, board?
So, Pope or Ben, if we knew that this is I know, David, you're gonna say it is, but if we knew it was a private drive that he owns, forgetting that we didn't change the PUD, he claims he's not, we knew it was always gonna be a dead end down there. Why would we say he can't put a gate up?
I think the gate comes to a different question on a private drive than it does you can't put one on a public road.
Obviously,
And so
I voted against it many times.
Right, and I think Ben addresses all of that. Ben's probably better than I, John, at discussing. I don't know whether he does or doesn't recommend it now. I really don't know the answer to that.
Well, I think ultimately it gets to the connectivity, whether it was, in July, it was a public road. It was presenting to be a public road. It went to the Planning Commission. This was going to be a public road. Now it's not. Now it's private. So, from our standpoint, it's always from staff. It's always been planned to be a public road until it was not in July. Again, the fundamental, element here is the connectivity. And, the reason why you wouldn't have a gated there is that,
I got it.
I'll make a motion. How do you do this one?
And let me add something before y'all vote too, is if the gate is approved, it will provide an ability to have connectivity. If the gate is denied.
Can you explain that? I mean, when you say if there's a gate, there will be connectivity. If there's no gate, there will be no connectivity. I don't understand.
Okay, so right now it's a cul-de-sac, private drive to a cul-de-sac. If y'all deny that, the only way I can feel like we have a safe area there and don't have to worry about through traffic with the other homeowners other than Mr. Dickerson, then we would have to have gates on it to keep that from being a thoroughfare. Right now, the way it's approved, it's just a cul-de-sac. The only way I would connect it to the other side is to put a gate on it. I mean, that's the only.
So if we approve the gate, I just want to make sure I understand. If this board approves the gate, you're going to extend that dead end to the other side then?
Yeah. Yes. I'll have a gate, but let me say this too. Really all I'm asking for is one gate. I'm asking for one gate on my driveway. But to help with connectivity, I'm offering to build 2 gates.
And connect the road.
And connect the road.
Yeah, I understand.
But I can't go down there.
Yes, you can. And if there's an emergency, you could still drive through.
Fire and safety.
Fire and safety for emergency ingress egress.
Come through with my Jeep though.
Do I know?
I couldn't come in my regular car through.
That's not connectivity.
As of today, well, all right, let's start over.
He's offering.
As of today, it's not gonna connect. If you allow gates, we will allow for emergency access only. if you deny it, then there will not be emergency access. If you
Well, I hope there will be to your house in case it catches on
Well,
fire.
I'm talking about for areas to the east of my property. Or for really, well, let's say this, for areas to the west or east of my property. If there was some reason that someone needed to get through there to get somewhere, then we would connect it past where this plat is.
So to me, the easiest thing would be to keep it like it is, gate your driveway, and call it a day.
We can just gate it right now, but I was trying to, I'm doing a bad job of explaining it. I'm trying to help the city and the neighborhood by having, Mr. Brown that came up, he does not want through traffic. He doesn't want someone from Highway 30 to drive through. Nor does, and he's not the only one, I'm using him as an example, all the homeowners, 95% of the homeowners don't want that. But they definitely are okay with having them, you know, if I got caught in here and it needed another way out, it'd be nice to have emergency access to get out.
If you've got a policeman on Highway 30, they can come through and go through the safety to get to Sisk Avenue if needed. All he's offering, what he is offering is safety access through the gates.
It's a win, there's no negative to it.
I think the simplest thing you probably should ask for is just a gate, and talk about connectivity later. But I mean, if this is your
just a gate.
If this is your private road, property, there's gates all over town. It's almost like
the preserve, which is on the other side, the other preserve.
the other preserve that have it. I was going to say it's almost like Mr. Taylor, Thurkill Road. If you own most of the land on there, if you wanted to take it back over, then you should be able to put a gate on that road.
If I was driving some other people
Yeah.
into that, I wouldn't want to put a gate up.
Right.
Well, there's nobody else in there.
There's nobody, if there wasn't anybody else in there and you own 50 acres, you ought to be able to put your gate up outside.
What I'm trying to get my head around is, why would you want to build a road, gate both sides of it, when you can accomplish the same thing by putting a gate at your driveway? That's what I don't understand that.
The gate, my property's not all gated, so I don't have a gate going around my entire property. But my property is at the line. I'm trying to gate at my property line. That's all I'm trying to do. Just like every other, I'm trying to gate at the beginning of my driveway. That's what I'm doing. This is my driveway. I'm trying to gate at the beginning of my driveway.
And that's what I was saying. I'm not trying to speed anything up here. I'm just like, for the simple reasons, forget the connectivity right now, but I'll make a motion that we allow him to put a gate on his private road that goes to his 50 acres.
I'll second.
All right, any other comments by the board?
Well, I want to hear from Ben. Ben, you got a problem with that?
No,
I can't discuss?
no, yeah. My whole issue with any of this has nothing to do with private this and private that. My issue is legally speaking. From a pure legal standpoint, the PUD is on file. It shows this, that, and the other, and this is a change to it. Mississippi law, and I researched it heavily, it's purely legal from a standpoint. I don't think the change, and I think it's all intertwined. And if you change one thing, you change another, and I get it, and I'm all for property rights 100%, and 100%, I'm just talking legally speaking. I don't think our decision, if we approve the change in the PUD, would survive any appeal. And that's where I'm coming from, purely on this. Now, a gate, is it the gate position, is it positioned on the same road, Lakewood Drive?
It's on my private drive.
Yeah, which is, again, I'm not trying to confuse the issue. It's the road that was shown that hadn't been completed, but to this point is still private because you haven't turned it over to the city, correct?
I'm not turning over this.
I understand.
It's a private property.
I got it. I'm with you. Okay. All right. I just want my position out there that from a legal standpoint, I think all these things are intertwined. I don't think it's as easy as I'm not going to turn it over to the city, because I think that in essence is a change in the PUD, which was denied anyway. That's where I'm coming from. I understand 100% your position and I get it. But I think they're all very, very,
Intertwined.
I just think they're all the same issue. You come back to the same issue each time.
But Brian, there's not a lot of teeth in us trying to make him do anything that's on that PUD.
I'm not, but somebody can. I can't agree to something. It's the same as rezoning. And I did a lot deeper dive than I probably should have, going back to the early 1900s before PUDs were PUDs, and worked my way up. And it seems to me that when you file a planned unit development, it's called a planned unit development, and you submit a plan, and here's this plan, and that is on file, and that's been approved, and that planned unit development showed Lakewood Cove connecting to the Oaks Place. And that's been done since 2004 to 2019, and each phase is done, but it's still, you have this planned unit development showing the traffic and the transit, and it's been approved by this board. And now you say, well, I'm cutting this off. That changes everything. And so what we have to do is now modify what this board previously approved. And that's my hesitancy, is purely from a legal standpoint. It's a problematic for me, because this board previously approved it, and now to go back, you have to show substantial change or mistake. And I don't think there's that legal definition in there to me. That's where I'm coming down on all of this. Purely legal.
But the gate, again, the gate is on a private piece of property. Let's get to the gate. What we're talking about is the gate.
I know.
Not the PUD. The gate's on private property, and the city has very much a history of approving this exact request for homeowners with a lot less land and not as isolated as my property is. So I think it goes back to where we are today. It's a private property, and I'm just asking for a gate on a private drive, which I think is legal. That part, I mean, we can discuss whether we needed the PUD modification or not, but that's a separate matter. But this is just a gate.
That's why I try to make it like simple, more simple like that.
Okay, so any other?
Sorry, I interrupted you, Ben.
It's okay. I mean, I think from our standpoint, how we derived at the recommendations, it's working in reverse order from the gate to the plat to the PUD modification. One has to happen. We believed in the connectivity. We think that it should be there. And ultimately, that's why we recommended denial of the special exception for the gate.
Okay, any other comments from the board? I believe we had a motion by John Morgan and a second by Rick. All those in favor of approving the gate?
Aye.
Those opposed?
Nay.
All right, so the motion fails 4-3. All right, next on our agenda, request approval of a final plat amendment for case 2899, Eric Dahl.
I'm sorry, who was the fourth no? I had Howell, Bailey, okay.
Jason.
Brian, Preston.
Yes, ma'am.
Request approval of a final amendment for case 2899, Eric Dahl for Park Place Phases 1 and 2 for property located on Professional Drive, being further identified as PPINs 20577, 26930, 20578, 20579. Ben.
It's a plat amendment for lots 7, 8, 8A and 9 in the Park Place Phases 1 and 2 subdivision. It was originally platted in August of '99. In 2006, the applicant donated a portion of Lot 8 to the City of Oxford to allow a pedestrian bridge and a pathway to connect Notting Hill subdivision to Bailey Branch Park. It was later discovered that the legal description of the warranty deed was incorrect. It was corrected and about 2 years later. The subdivision was never modified to reflect the new lot lines. Therefore, the applicant is proposing to make this modification right now. And it will combine Lot 7 and 8A and a portion of Lot 8 and 9 together into 2 separate lots. And then the portion that was donated to the city will be removed from the subdivision. The Planning Commission unanimously approved this.
Move we approve.
Second.
All in favor? Any opposed? First reading of a proposed ordinance to amend zoning map for case 2900 to rezone approximately .158 acres from institutional government to suburban corridor and approximately .439 acres that is not zoned to institutional government for property located at Professional Drive, being further identified as PPINs 319432693A.
So this is the same piece of property, but the Lot 8A was zoned institutional government, and I believe that this was part of the incorrect deed. And then the portion that was donated to the city is not zoned. So what this request would be to modify the zoning so that way the 8A, which is now combined into new Lot 7, is all zoned suburban corridor. And then the portion of property that is removed that the city owns will be institutional government. So that is the request. We believe that this is a mistake, and that is the justification for the zoning. There is no change in need. It was an error. Planning Commission recommended to approve this with a 6-0 vote. This is a first reading.
Is just a first reading.
Yes,
so
ma'am.
at our next meeting, we'll have a second reading and public hearing on that issue. Request approval of a preliminary and final plat for case 2902 Andy Calicut for Oxford Farm Subdivision Phase 9 for property located on Oxford Way, being further identified as PPIN 8903. Robert.
All right, so this is about 4.5 acres on the north side of Oxford Way, just east of Stillwater Development. It's a request for preliminary and final plat approval for a single lot. The proposed lot meets the dimensional requirements for the underlying zoning, and staff has received the draft covenants for the subdivision. Engineering has provided comments related to access, water and sewer, stormwater, and floodplains. The Planning Commission recommended approval 6-0 for the preliminary and final plat, and staff recommends approval with the 2 conditions that are listed in the memo.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? Any opposed? Request permission for, Chief McCutcheon requests permission for Walmart to hire uniformed officers for holiday shopping, Black Friday, details at $46 an hour.
Motion made.
All in favor? Any opposed? Request permission to approve a parade assembly permit for the University of Mississippi Southern Documentary Project on Tuesday, November 1st from 6:30 to 8:30.
Yes, ma'am. This will be at the skate park. I think Seth and his team will look at it tomorrow. We have no issues with it. We can cover it.
Motion made.
Second.
All in favor? Any opposed? Request permission to approve a parade assembly permit for the Christmas lighting event on November the 8th at 6 o'clock. Yeah!
I heard a first and a second.
I will cut you. It's professional. Put that in the paper. She said, I will cut you. All right, a motion and a second. All in favor? Any opposed? Request permission to approve a parade assembly permit for the Oxford Square Alliance to host the holiday open house on the square on November the 25th from 10 a.m. to 6:15 p.m.
So moved.
All in favor? Any opposed? Request permission to approve a list of final budget reallocation and amendments for FY ended September 30th, 2022. Ashley?
Yes, as we wrap up our fiscal year, this is our housekeeping item where we adjust any budgets that needed adjusting through reallocation or amendments. Most of them are, again, net zero to many of the departments, but there are a few that we did make some additions to and or reductions. Mostly increases in revenue, accounted for a lot of it.
Second.
All in favor?
Thank you.
Any opposed? Consider a contract with McCarty Architects for the design of a new police station. Mark Levy?
Last week, we met with McCarty Architects, and they submitted the site analysis, programming, conceptual design, which concluded the pre-portion part of their contract. The pre-planning package At that meeting, the board requested a design contract for consideration, which is what you have in front of you. I left memos on all your spots. The design contract is an AIA B132 agreement that breaks down the design into schematic design, design development, construction documents, bidding, construction administration. In order to move forward, each phase will have to be approved by the board. There's no penalty for termination of the services for any reason. The fee structure is a percentage of the total constructed amount, which will be around 7%. At each design milestone, ICM will provide an updated estimate, and the information will be shared with the board throughout the design phase. And if we approve tonight, then we recommend letting Pope take a look at it and make sure everything's good.
With Pope's
Recommendation.
second.
All right, all in favor? Any opposed? Consider a request to accept infrastructure from the County Road 412 Water Association. Rihanna?
Yes, thank you. The Oxford Utilities Department was contacted by the County Road 412 Water Association, and they requested that the city take over ownership and maintenance of a 2-inch water main that serves that area. This is a similar request to what the board considered several years ago for County Road 322, 324, 326, immediately across the road. And what it is this was previously in the county, and there was a meter set at the highway. And then at some point, the water line was run and additional private meters were set out there sometime in the 70s, 80s. We have reviewed the infrastructure that's in place. We've met with the manager of the Water Association. We've discussed it with utilities, and so we do believe that this will be to receive those easements to eventually allow us to install a water main that would allow us to provide fire access out there. So we do believe there's benefit to the city to take over this water association now. When we extend the water out there, it would go away anyway. So I would just recommend acceptance of this association contingent on receipt of all the easements, and the utility department does have the deposits already in place.
All in favor? Any opposed? Consider a contract with Integrated Right-of-Way for professional services related to the University Avenue Highway 7 Interchange Improvement Project.
Yes, I would recommend that we hire Integrated Right-of-Way to manage all of our right-of-way acquisition. This will include the acquisition of appraisals, the review appraisal that's required by MDOT, and going through the property acquisition process. And their contract provides some menu of services so that items that our own legal counsel can provide, we can use our own counsel instead of using services from them. And so this company is on the MDOT master contract list, which, because this is going to be MDOT right away at the end, we need to go through one of their approved providers.
Move we approve.
Second.
All in favor? Any opposed? Consider request to accept infrastructure for Villa West Phase 1 within the Seminole Bluff subdivision.
Yes, we've performed a final inspection of the infrastructure that's been completed, and there's 2 punch list items that are still remaining. Those will be completed, I believe, this week. We've received the as-built plans, all of the documents that we need, and so I would recommend acceptance of the infrastructure and of the bonds for the water, sewer, and street infrastructure, other than the final lift of asphalt, sidewalk signage, and traffic pending, which we have a separate bond for, and contingent on receipt of the bonds, which I received today, and the test results, which I also have actually. So I recommend you accept this infrastructure. Apologize. It's been a night.
I move we follow our engineer's advice and accept.
Second.
All in favor? Any opposed? Consider a request to accept infrastructure within Owens Place. Rihanna?
Yes, Owens Place is at the extension of Bell River, our affordable housing development, and this inspection was completed in September of last year. The punch list items have been completed. We have received the as-built drawings. The only thing that we are still in need of is the deeds dedicating the road to the city. And so any approval would be contingent on receipt of those deeds. And then I also would ask for the board to consider if you are going to require a warranty bond or not. Previously, when you have considered affordable housing developments, you have not required that warranty bond. This infrastructure has been inspected for over a year, and it was in place for some period of time before the inspection. So I would just ask that any motion include direction regarding if you're going to require that warranty bond or not.
Do you feel comfortable without the warranty bond?
I do, considering how long it's been in place, the contractor, the quality of the work that was performed, I do.
Okay. All right, is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? All right, I'll ask the board now to consider an executive session. Second. All in favor? Any opposed? You see that